Drivers, start your engine!
Good evening, race fans. Welcome to the Who's Radio Network and welcome to the Drafting the Circuits program. My name is Frank Santoroski. I'll be your host for the next hour as we talk about this week in racing and preview next week. Joining me in the studio, I have Richard Youden and Adam Schrack. Fellas, how we doing, man?
Pretty good.
Good, thank you.
All right, so this is always a kind of pretty happy time of the year for me, but it's also a sad time of the year because I always love seeing the IndyCar Championship be decided, but it pains me that it's so early compared to the other racing series that we have, because we'll be continuing to watch Formula One till almost Christmas and be watching NASCAR till Thanksgiving and a lot of football as well, but there'll be no IndyCar till the spring. But we do have the championship weekend coming up. So tonight will be our IndyCar championship finale show. And we'll also cover that Formula One race and that NASCAR race and get you all the latest race news. But for you folks who aren't familiar with Adam Schrack, this is his first time on the show with us. Adam runs a Facebook group called Elite Indycar. If you're in that group, fantastic. If you're not, it's a great group to join. Even I believe endorsed by Marshall Pruitt, who endorsed it in his mailbag one week. But it's one of the few Facebook groups you can join, and you can actually win prizes and stuff. So Adam, introduce yourself to our listeners and talk about Elite a little bit, real quick.
Yeah, sure. So I just grew up in California, huge IndyCar fan. Didn't start going to races until probably 8 years ago. Started going to Indy 500. Well, I go to races out in California, but the big one was 8 years ago. But yeah, I stumbled upon this Elite IndyCar group several years ago, and I joined. And eventually they realized I was so passionate, they made me an admin. And eventually I sort of took over most of the day-to-day running. Frank helps out too quite a bit. We do a lot of fun stuff there. So I do a whole bunch of hustling, selling Elite IndyCar merchandise, and all the money we use for giveaways. We do race threads and practice threads and qualifying threads for every race weekend. We do meetups at the race. But the giveaways are one of the big things that separate us. I think this year I calculated we did about $7,000 worth of merchandise, which is by far and away the most we've ever given away. We gave away a whole bunch of die casts, and not just current ones, but a bunch of $200-300 ones from the Roadster days, and tickets to races, and hats and jerseys and posters and books. We gave away a 2-seater ride with Mario Andretti, a bunch of signed merchandise or pictures, signed Foyt diecast, just a whole slew of stuff, anything I could find with the profits we made. And then we do these giveaways. It's a real fun group. And I think one of the things that sets us apart from a lot of things on social media is we do not tolerate people being disrespectful to each other. So it's just a passionate group where we can disagree, but we can't be mean to each other. So it's a fun place to be. And I think we've sort of earned a decent following. And like Frank said, Marshall Pruitt even said, go to us in one of his mailbags, which was kind of a big coup for us.
I think we're close to 10,000 members, right?
Yeah, we're small, but when you're so tough as we are about treating people respectfully, you'll lose some people because some people just want to disagree and then call each other idiots. And then we boot those people out because we're not about that. So we have 9,000 people who are respectful and who like talking about IndyCar, in a nice way, rather than just being, the way people usually are on social media.
Yeah, a lot of really knowledgeable people in the group. We've got people that are former crewmen, current crew people that are relatives of drivers. We have a few drivers in the group, journalists in the group. Yeah, it's just a really knowledgeable base. I mean, if you ask a question in there, you'll have 3 people pop up with an answer real quick, and it'll be the right answer, 9 times out of 10.
Right.
So, yeah, but speaking of IndyCar, so we did race at Portland, and Richard, the first lap wreck we predicted did not as it never happened, which is really interesting for Portland. And matter of fact, we went 84 green laps before we had an incident. But it was
what an incident that was.
Yeah, we'll talk about that in a moment. But it was Scott McLaughlin in the Penske car winning the pole, and to this guy's credit, he didn't put a wheel wrong all day. His pit stops were perfect. His strategy was perfect. His driving was outstanding, and he, dominated that race and won it in very convincing fashion. Again, this is, here's a guy who's only in his second full season in the series. He's got his third win for himself, ninth win for Penske on the season, and he's still alive for the championship, although the championship battle is now realistically down to three guys, those being Will Power, Scott Dixon, and Joseph Newgarden. And like my good friend Joey Barnes always says, we've never had a real good Dixon versus Power run for the championship. And we've got exactly that this year, So this year has been just wonderful. I've had a lot of good races, a lot of, neat things going on. But to your point about the yellow, Rinus VeeKay, I don't know what that was about. He's like booted Jimmy Johnson out of the way as if he wasn't there, or he expected Jimmy to just roll over. I know Jimmy's a little slower on the road courses, but it doesn't mean you should knock him around. So, and of course, he got himself a drive-through penalty there. But deeper in the field, we saw some good action with Potable Ward trying to grab some spots toward the end of the race. We saw a real questionable call with Newgarden, who put the black tires on for the final stint. Now, Adam, I know you had a chance to watch the race, and Richard, I know you had a chance to watch the race. What were they thinking? It was quite obvious the blacks were not coming in, and the red tire was the way to go. How in the world did Penske muff that strategy and put Newgarden's on blacks where he just went backwards in the final stint?
Yeah, I don't know what tires they had left over. I think that's one of the things that I certainly didn't catch during the coverage. And I know at one point during the race, I think Will Power was saying, the blacks are better. But obviously, looking at all the data run, from everybody else, it's the driver doesn't, they don't see that. They just know what they feel. Probably contradicted that. So if they didn't have any brand new any brand new of the red tires available, and they were just purely going, all they had was some scrub, then maybe they were looking at, the long game there with, they didn't want to blister the tires or have them drop off, too early in that run. But yeah, it was an unusual call, and you have to feel that, there was some reasoning behind it more than just, we've got a new set of reds and a new set of blacks. Let's throw the blacks on.
Well, and one thing Newgarden did say after the race is they weren't predicting the yellow. And I think that sort of, they weren't expecting the field to be bunched up. And once that happened and he was on blacks and everyone else was on reds, he was kind of a sitting duck there.
Yeah, this is quite, and we did, we saw the questionable strategy with Will Power a couple of races back. And again, we've talked about splitting strategies and whatnot, but I don't know. Richard, are you sure that Will Power didn't say, "Hey, tell Joseph the blacks are better"? Because Joseph,
you'd like to think the guys on.
Because Joseph came into this race 3 points behind Will Power, and he left this race 20 points behind, tied with Scott Dixon. So, Adam, you have worked out the championship scenarios. Obviously, Will Power with the lead has the easiest path to it. So let's just kind of break down the numbers of what would need to happen for one of these other guys to wrestle that thing away from Will.
Right. So this doesn't take into account necessarily all the bonus points because that would take forever. But it is certainly more possible that second or third, who have the same number of points this year, Dixon and Newgarden, could pull it off than last year. Last year, Ward needed to finish in first to have any chance, and then he needed Pillow to finish 21st, I think, or worse. This year, if either Newgarden or Dixon win the race, a fifth place finish or worse for Power will give the title to Dixon or Newgarden. And actually, Power could even finish as high as fourth. And if Newgarden or Dixon get max points, they'd still win the title. So Power can have a pretty good day and still not come away with the champion. Of course, he has the far better chance to win than the other two drivers because he has a 20-point lead. But it's still not a guarantee. He still has to go out there and have a decent day. If Newgarden or Dixon finish in second, he's got to finish ninth or better to keep that championship. If they finish in third, he's got to finish in the top 14. So, if he gets booted early on in the race and gets sent to the back of the field, he's going to have to charge pretty hard, given Dixon or Newgarden being in a high position. Of course, if they struggle, if they're mired in fifth, sixth, seventh, then he's going to be pretty safe. And in fact, if they don't finish in the top 7, they have no chance. So if they're in the low bottom 10, the top 10 in there, he can just cruise around and be perfectly fine wherever he finishes. And even if they're 5th or 6th. So he's got a good chance, but if there's a dominating weekend by either one of those guys, he's got to be on his game to make sure he doesn't lose the title.
Yeah, the thing is, those two guys, Dixon and Newgarden, they need to be aggressive, but they need to be careful. They can't afford to, get offline. Then, of course, there's the Colton Herta factor. That being the fact that it seemed like every time we go to Laguna Seca, Colton Herta just, makes it his own personal playground, wipes up the field. So if you want to concede the win to Colton Herta, that takes the opportunity to win away from those other guys. So they need to.
Will Power would sign up today for Colton Herta to have the win.
Absolutely, yeah.
He only has to finish 9th.
Yep. So, but yeah, you got to watch out for, and again, anybody else to have a strong run. Rossi's run good at Laguna. Andretti's, been so up and down this year with their performance. And then, of course, McLaughlin is just on fire. I mean, that's another guy that could jump in there, win that thing. But it'd still be a tall order for him to win the championship because he needs
that too.
Yeah, he needs all three of those guys to get in some trouble.
Well, he's in the award situation from last year. He needs to win the race and have Power finish 21st or worse. And then he also needs Dixon and Newgarden to finish outside of the top 9, I believe. So he needs some pretty bad days for all three of those. If he wins, of course, he would pass. Who am I forgetting in 4th?
Award?
Is it Award?
Award, right?
No, it's Ericsson, Marcus Ericsson.
Oh, that's Ericsson also mathematically alive. Yeah.
Right. But if he would win the race, he would pass Ericsson. But he still needs bad days from the top 3 guys to have a chance. So realistically, it's one of the top 3 guys are going to be the champion.
Right. Then, of course,
assured.
The magic bullet for Newgarden is that he wins all tiebreakers because he's got 5 wins on the season to Dixon's got 2. I think Power just has the 1 and McLaughlin has 3. So any tiebreaker is going to go to Newgarden based on the 5 wins. So it'll be exciting to watch. I mean, Laguna isn't always an exciting race, but the fact that we have the championship scenario there, and again, to Will Power's credit, the guy has been a model of consistency this year. He's not the Will Power of old, where he tend to get a little flustered, a little angry, make some mistakes there. This guy has consistently been on the podium nearly every race. I think you said his average finish is 5.2 or something like that.
I think it's 6.
6.
Well, what we could have is, if you remember from Sonoma a few years ago when Dixon won the title over JPM, when Montoya came in with a pretty decent lead. And he was in 7th or 8th, and it was right down there at the points as they run came down to the final lap. And it was literally, if he can get from 8th to 7th or whatever the case was, Montoya would have taken the title, and he couldn't do it. So we could have a situation like that where Power's midfield could be very interesting the last few laps.
Wasn't that the sort of silly situation with the Montoya thing when they had double points in the final race, if I remember right?
Yeah, I think they were still doing double points then for sure. They only gave that up in 2020, I think, or 2019.
Yeah, it's like that's just always makes it. Frank, I've been on this. We talked about this. I think double points in any race is a silly idea, especially the last race of the season.
Agreed.
Yes, it's a gimmick. It's unnecessary to even. And I understand the double points for Indy because they want that race to have that prestige. But to a point I read on Twitter the other day, right? Somebody had figured out the IndyCar points standings the last 3 seasons, right? If you take all the oval races out, and this significantly changes Colton Herta's finishing his his standings in the finishing order. Whereas in the past 3 seasons, he would have earned 66 super license points. And it wouldn't be an issue right now with AlphaTauri looking at him for a ride with only 32. So it just goes to show you how important or how much the double points for the Indianapolis 500 really sways the point standings there.
Yeah. Oh no, for sure. And I have very, so we've been over this enough times, Frank. My view on that.
Right.
And also, the number of guest drivers, not guest drivers, that's the wrong word, but one-off drivers that you see in the Indy 500, taking points away from, guys that should be scoring points, and if they weren't there, it's
yeah.
I think he had a situation where I know Kellett tends to finish toward the rear, but it was something like Tony Kanaan, race 11 into the season, was still ahead of Kellett in the standings because of the one double points finish that he finished well at Indy, which is kind of crazy. No matter how poorly Kellett's doing, you can't pass a guy because he has one double points race at Indy.
Yeah. And same thing with Elio last year when he wasn't running the full season. He won the 500, and he was kind of near the top of the top half of the standings for most of the season. So, and again, look at Ericsson has led the points through most of the summer until the Will's consistency caught up, and and Marcus's did not. So, all right, so let's talk about Monterey then. And go ahead and let's go ahead and make our predictions for race winner and champion. And Adam, since you're our guest, I'll start with you.
Well, it's hard not to pick Herta, though Andretti Autosport's not been great this year. I haven't given enough thought to pick a winner of the race, but I do feel pretty strongly that Power is going to win the title. Anything can happen. You can get punted on lap 1 and the whole thing can go up in smoke, but he's just been so consistent this year. You look at the first 6 races of the season, he was like 3rd, 4th, 4th, 3rd, 2nd, 1st, and he's pretty much held that. He's only had a few poor races, so I like his chances to win the title. And I'm looking at this graph I made that shows all the possible finishing scenarios for both Dixon and Newgarden and Will Power, and it's shaded 80% of the possibilities as far as where they could finish favor Will Power winning the title. So I think it's definitely going to be Will Power's second title come Sunday night.
All right. And who did you pick for the race winner? You said you didn't.
I didn't give it much thought. You put me on the spot there, but
exactly. I put people on the spot every week. That's what we do.
I've only been thinking about the championship, but I'll take Herta because why not?
Why not? Okay. And Richard, as far as you're concerned?
Pretty similar answers, I think, to both those questions, to tell you the truth.
I think all 3 of us are going to take Power for the championship. Yeah. I really.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
I'm a gambler and I play the percentages.
Yeah, I mean, let's go with let's go with Rossi for the race. I don't know, just picking somebody different, for whatever it's worth.
And I'll tell you who I like for the race is McLaughlin. I do, McLaughlin leading and Will in a close second or third. That keeps, that's a team strategy to keep Dixon from winning. It doesn't help Newgarden at all, but it certainly helps Power to have McLaughlin ahead of him rather than Newgarden. So, but again, all bets are off. These guys are all teammates. They all want to win that race, and all 3 of them have been strong this year. So it's I don't see it going any other way than another championship for Penske and another championship for Will Power. But Scott Dixon is that guy you can never count out. I mean, he's got 6 of these things on his mantle, So, all right then. So,
yep. No, yeah.
And other IndyCar news, obviously we touched on the Colton Herta situation, where AlphaTauri has an agreement, I guess, in spirit, if they approve the super license. And there's some differing opinions amongst the other Formula One teams there. Some are saying, no, absolutely not. And others are saying, well, why not? You know what I mean? Because if you ask me, the super license points are way too slanted towards Formula 2. I mean, look, Formula 2 gives you 40 points to finish first, second, or third. And then of course IndyCar, you get 40 points for the title, but then it's 30 points, 20 points. It's a descending scale. And why the disparity? Because it's not their own feeder. So that'll be really interesting to see how that turns out. But I feel like if Liberty wants it, Liberty will make it happen. Richard?
Yeah. I have sort of mixed opinions on this. I think a little bit. I think that I think looking at Herder as a driver, there's undoubtedly speed there and a lot of speed, but the kid, to my mind, makes too many mistakes in situations where he shouldn't make mistakes. And Nashville last year, prime example. I think he had, was it Long Beach this year as well? It's just something's missing at the moment in his makeup in terms of as a driver in the long term. And does he deserve a super license? Yes, I firmly believe he does. But does he deserve the seat in Formula One? I question that. There's been a number of drivers go from IndyCar to Formula One.
You are on record as stating that Herta's not quite ready for Formula One, and I do appreciate your opinion. But at the same time, it's going into Formula One is something you can grow into. You can get in there and not set the world on fire right away, but as you kind of feel your way through and learn the politics and learn the system, I think that he'll be okay. But I could be totally wrong.
I hope you're right. I'd love to see him go there, get a drive, and do as well as we expect. As we'd hope him to do in terms of his raw speed. It would be fantastic to see. But do I think that the weighting of the points is wrong? Yes. I do. I think IndyCar does deserve more points, but to the same token, do I think that they should adjust the points weightings to promote him? I struggle with that.
Because
you start making exceptions.
Rules are exactly. If you start making exceptions, then the whole reason for the super license to begin with was to keep unqualified ride buyers out of the series. But I would not. I would not classify Herta as an unqualified ride buyer by any stretch of the imagination. No. So, Adam, do you have an opinion on this?
Only that I'm excited to see it happen because I think it'd be fun to see what he could do. But I agree, he does seem to make a few too many mistakes. But if the whole point of the super license is just to make sure that qualified drivers are the only ones racing in Formula One, I don't think we can doubt that his skill level is up there to where he certainly could be one of the back 10, 15 cars in the field. But how well he'll do, I don't know. But I'm just excited to see finally a current IndyCar guy go over there and at least give it a shot so we can find out.
Yeah, it's been since Bourdais, right? Bourdais was the last one.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
But do you not also think that there's a bit of a precedent here where if he were to go there and the FAA implement this waiver to allow him in there, and if he does well, great, awesome, cool, good stuff. Everybody said he was going to do well. But what if he struggles and he becomes, and this is no disrespect to a Bourdais or a
Michael Andretti,
Zanardi, or and he goes there and he's just meh. Then people are going to say, well, hang on, you've weighted a system, you fiddled the system to benefit a kid who doesn't deserve a seat, and there's another driver that did deserve a seat that never got an opportunity. And I mean, that's the blame, or not blame, but that's the accusation made against guys like Nicholas Latifi and Nikita Mazepin. They were just put in there because of the money, and there'd be no doubt that Colton Hurst would obviously bring a lot of money to the AlphaTauri team with his, from a lot of US backing. So I just think they've got to be really careful here with the decision they make, and the ramifications of him not being up to it. It could sort of make that journey even harder in the future. You know, wait a year, get a championship. You know, we're talking about going into arguably the best series in the world from a driver standpoint. And the kids never won an IndyCar championship. You know, Bourdais won multiple championships. Nardi won multiple championships. I think Michael won championships. And just, you know, and none of them were successful. So I worry what could happen here for the long term.
Yeah, he's definitely going to be under a microscope. You know, every move he makes is going to be watched carefully if they fiddle the rules for him. So, but that's a developing story. Then, of course, he could stay in IndyCar and you know, attend as many test sessions and free practice sessions as he can, because you earn super license points for doing those free practice sessions. So that's a possibility as well. And then, you know, join the Formula One grid in 2024 with the full 32 points, especially if he has a good finish in IndyCar. So now, Adam, I know you need to leave us. So I do want to thank you for coming on. Certainly appreciate your insight into IndyCar. You're very knowledgeable. And again, the group is Elite Indycar, ELITE IndyCar on Facebook. Go ahead and
check us out.
Yeah, check us out. Join up. You've got to answer a few simple questions. What's your favorite track? Who's your favorite driver? And then we'll take a look at you and let you in, and you know, join the great conversations and you know, partake in those giveaways and whatnot. It is the end of the season, so things will slow down, but you know, it's gonna be spring before you know it.
Exactly. We'll ramp it up again next year.
All right. So
thanks, guys. I had a good time.
Oh, thank you, Adam. I really appreciate you joining us.
Of course. So. Have a good night.
All right. Appreciate it.
Yeah, good to meet you.
You too.
All right. So, Richard, since we're discussing Formula One a little bit, and then of course the last little bit of IndyCar news is that Scott McLaughlin has re-upped his contract with Penske multi-year.
Yep.
This should not surprise anybody given the young man's performance. And his, you know, he's been a Penske guy for a number of years, you know, through the Supercar series down under. So that's just going to continue the good thing they've got going there at Team Penske there. They really have, you know, they're firing all cylinders this year. Whereas like, it seemed like the last 2 years, right after Roger bought the track in the series, Penske had a few struggles, but now they're, you know, ironclad. So you better watch out for them next year. I mean, McLaughlin's going to he's going to head into 2023 as one of the championship favorites for sure. But let's talk about this Dutch Grand Prix, where the Max's Army was out there, and of course Max won the race, but it wasn't as easy as some of these others he's won this year. So take us through it a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, it was, you know, Max's playground, really, the Sea of Orange, you know, for probably the third race of the season, you know, out there supporting him. And, you know, he drove a fantastic weekend, very few mistakes. You know, the strategy calls were a little bit mixed there with, you know, the Mercedes guys trying to do it on one stop and Max trying to do a two stop. So it would have meant that Max would have had to have passed Hamilton on track. We then had a, you know, virtual safety car and then a full safety car period, which didn't help Hamilton and allowed Russell to, you know, go into a more optimal strategy, which unfortunately shuffled Hamilton back in the pack from being in. I don't think he'd have won the race if they hadn't had that safety car. I still think Max would have eventually caught him and passed him, purely due to the raw speed differential. But it certainly made the job a lot easier for Max on that restart there, and you know, Max coasted to that victory. So another disappointing day for the Ferraris, who fall even further back in the standings. And yeah, I mean, it looks very, you know, Hamilton-esque. You know, Verstappen's march to a second championship. You know, almost Vettel-esque, if you like, as well from a Red Bull standpoint. But it was a pretty well executed race from the guys at Red Bull. You know, they did what they needed to do. They didn't make any mistakes. They didn't, you know, have any dramas. As I say, even if the you know, the strategy hadn't played out quite the way we saw it, I still do think that that Max would have got that race win.
Yeah, I mean, betting against Max any week is a tough one. The man has just been on fire. The car is wonderful.
Yep.
But then now there were some questions, right, about the lighter chassis that apparently Red Bull showed up with after the summer break.
Yep.
And they're kind of wondering, the question is, have they violated the spending cap, which is kind of hard to really prove one way or the other. But I mean, what are your thoughts on this? Because it seems like nobody else has enough money just to show up with a new chassis after the break.
Well, I don't think they have. There's a lot of talk of them turning up with a new chassis, but I don't think they actually have, and I'll stand corrected if that's not the case. But yeah, there has certainly been talk of it, and it would certainly be interesting, especially after some of the comments coming out from people like Christian Horner about saving money in the cost cap and inflation over the last 6 months, and the energy prices going up so much, it becomes very, very difficult. So yeah, it's a very grey area. The concept of cost caps. I mean, one of the things that teams used to do in the past, and whether they still do it now or not, I don't know, is take a standard component, for example, like the transmission and the gearbox, in a team like Red Bull's instance, where they have Red Bull Racing, which is the operational team, and also Red Bull Technology. What would happen is Red Bull Technology would actually sell the gearbox to Red Bull Racing for like $5,000. I mean, these things cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. But they'd say, oh well, we spent $50,000 on gearboxes this year. When in fact they really, from a Red Bull Technology standpoint, spent $5 million on transmission. So that's one of the things they used to do to sort of mask some of the costs. Now, whether they still do that, or they're allowed to do that, or the FIA are a little bit smarter into that, I'm not sure. But it has been a difficult thing, this cost cap. You look at Mercedes, for example, was stating that their energy bills have gone up from £1 million to £4 million in the last 6 months, and they're actually announced that they're going to be investing in a solar farm near their site in the UK to provide free or cheap electricity to their site, so in the future years they can use some of that money to further develop the car, which I think is a great initiative. And I think you almost need to be looking at the potential of giving some of these teams credit for doing green initiatives and allowing them, say, start running solar farms and what have you to create energy. Then that would allow them to, give them an extra £1 million on the cap, on the budget cap, or whatever it may be, to really encourage some of these, incentives and activities. But it's a very grey area, and I'm not an accountant. I'm certainly not a forensic accountant like these teams in the FA will be using. So there's. Some of these teams will now be spending as much money on these accountants that can hide money than they are on engineers who can make the cars go fast.
And that's the nature of the business, right? So,
yeah.
Now, of course, the other controversy was that some folks think that Tsunoda, where he came out of the pits, he thought the tire was loose and kind of pulled off the track, and then rejoined. Which caused a virtual safety car. There's some folks that accused them of staging that to help Max out. Of course, the team vehemently denied that. And I mean, if you listen to the in-car audio, I don't, think Yuki Tsunoda is a great actor. I think he was genuinely thought something was wrong with the car there till they ran the data and told him he was fine. Yeah.
Well, you see, the problem. So I was actually looking into this, and I was reading an article on this earlier today, and they had a differential failure. And of course, Tsunoda comes out the garage, feels some, he does this hard, aggressive, how they pull out the pit, it's almost like rear slide, and felt at that point, oh, yeah, something's not right here. And it's coming from the rear of the car, and it felt like a wheel was loose. So he's driving slowly for the rest of the lap, and eventually pulls over on the side of the track. Now, what he felt was, I say, the differential failed. Now, if you're driving slowly, the differential doesn't do anything because both rear wheels are going to be spinning at the same speed, and you're not really going to notice it. Whereas when you would notice a differential failure is at high speed and high sort of torque differential between the two rear axles. So, in the data, they wouldn't have seen anything, especially when the car was stationary on the side of the track. They're looking at live data. And they're saying, look, we don't see anything wrong here. Come back round. So he came back round, went into the pits. They changed the tires. All the wheels were on properly. They fastened his seatbelts, which was a little bit sketchy on my part, where he was allowed to drive 3/4 of the lap with loose seatbelts. That was, I didn't like that, but it is what it is. I'm sure he'll be reprimanded for that appropriately. But then, of course, what happens is he does another aggressive slide out the pit box, and that's when they're obviously looking for these issues with, the potential differential or rear axle, and they see it when he's doing that aggressive slide, and that's the point where they said, okay, yeah, we do have a problem, stop the car. So yeah, all these conspiracy theories, I'm sorry, that they're not true there. When they explain what they saw, it makes perfect sense.
All right. So now the other thing is that you mentioned the loose seatbelts, right? So are we assuming that he started to undo his belts in anticipation of being out of the race at that time?
Correct. So when he parked,
now isn't there an F1 rule about that once you undo the belts, you're done for the day?
Possibly, yes. And I think that's why
I was going to say that I was reading a few bits about that. Or certainly if you get out of the car, I believe you're done for the day. Didn't we have a issue like this with one of the Ferraris just recently where
I knew you had that issue. No, it was George Russell at Silverstone.
Oh, that's right. It was George Russell.
He got out of the car to see how Guan Yu Zhou was, and of course he got out of the car, and then one of the marshals moved the car. It was, the marshal moved it, so you can't get back in and restart it. And that was all a little bit unfortunate.
Yeah. So the rule's in place for a reason, but when you're talking about checking on a fellow competitor who's you're really worried for this guy's safety, and then the marshal touches the car. But again, rules are rules, like we said. But again, rules are made to be broken sometimes, or amended, or subject to a FIA board review, right? Yeah. So yeah, but another fine performance for Max overall. Russell on the podium. Hamilton was running in contention for a podium, and then he just he should have pitted for the softs, right?
Yeah,
instead of trying to do the long game, and it didn't work. Yeah,
and it was and I always sort of we've looked at this before, and it is a comment that I've made many times. And I think that what Formula One needs to do is implement a restart zone as per NASCAR for these races. I think when they leave it up to the drivers, I think it can be, messy. I think if you have a zone, I think it removes a lot of the unknown quantities in there, and also it's a safety thing. You're backing off to let the safety car get into the pit lane, and we've seen at some circuits like Azerbaijan, they get pretty damn close to that safety car when they're accelerating away from their launch that they've created themselves, if you like. So I really would like to see them have a restart zone, and that would maybe neutralize some of the advantages and disadvantages you get in those situations.
Sure, yeah, and absolutely. And then of course the virtual safety car has its own set of issues where the cars are supposed to maintain the distance before the thing, but not everybody is really good at judging that.
Yeah, and that's the other problem. It depends where you get restarted. If the virtual safety car ends in position A, or at timestamp A, and you're in a certain location on the track, then you could be in an acceleration zone or you could be in a braking zone, and it has huge impacts on your delta to another driver, for example. I mean, one of the things you could do is let the guys stay in their position, and then everybody restarts when they cross the start finish line. So if you're at the start of the virtual safety car 5 seconds behind the guy in front, he'll pass the start and finish line 5 seconds before you do, and then you're both accelerating at the same point. I don't know. I don't know if that would work, but maybe it's an idea. I don't know.
Yeah, so we're off to Monza.
Yeah.
This coming weekend. Yep. We've got this is Ferrari's home track. They're hoping to do well. Again, Ferrari is their own worst enemy. they continue to shoot themselves in the foot. They had a pretty decent start at the Dutch Grand Prix, and they were running pretty well for a while, but they just flubbed the strategy, for lack of a better word there. Allowed Mercedes to take the second step on the podium, but Leclerc did finish third. He does maintain second in the points, although huge gap up to Max. And this is going to be one of them seasons where we, the last couple races are garbage because the championship would be decided well before the season is over. At this current rate. So, yeah, I mean, and we've seen it before in Formula One a number of times. Golly, if you recall, Jochen Rindt in 1970 actually had a fatal accident, but he had such the championship lead that, there were 3 more races after Rindt passed away, and he still won the title. So,
Yep.
So, I'm not saying I hope anybody passes away. But but we've seen. But this is an equally lopsided championship run for Max, considering that Ferrari has been nowhere close to challenging them since the first couple of races of the season.
Yeah.
So, what do you like for Monza?
There's been a few. I mean,
yes. I mean, with that being said, I mean, is Ferrari gonna be able to win one in front of their home crowd?
Well, it's a unique circuit, isn't it? It's it's the circuit where they run the cars in the lowest trim possible from an aero standpoint, and you try and reference some of the other tracks with a similar setup aerodynamically, which is there's not many, but you maybe lean towards a Spa sort of aero setup with even less downforce than that, and Max is pretty damn dominant there. So I think I do think that. Red Bull are going to be the dominant team again this weekend coming up, and I really don't think that Ferrari are going to have much chance, unfortunately.
I would tend to agree. Yeah, Red Bull has been pretty good in every configuration. Fast tracks, slow tracks, any tracks where there's Max.
Yep.
Yeah. So it's hard to bet against Max, but it would be neat to see a Ferrari win in Monza. It's always when those sort of things happen, it's always just tremendous for that fan base. And that fan base needs a little boost. It's been disappointing, certainly after all the promise. And this is typical Ferrari. Even if you recall when they had Vettel driving for them, they'd come out of the box strong at the beginning of the season, but they just couldn't keep up with the other team's rate of development as the season wore on. And I don't know if that's
when Alonso was there as well. Yeah.
When Alonso was there as well. Yeah. So, I mean, you've had some really top solid guys that just couldn't do much in a Ferrari. I mean, again, their last championship was 2007 with Kimi, and even and even that one was real close. That was that one. That one could have went a couple of different ways. I think there were like 3 guys. I know Hamilton was
Hamilton, Alonso. And
the other Ferrari driver who was
Massa at the time, wasn't it?
Felipe Massa was actually leading the points. Yeah. Kimi was the long shot and won the title.
He was the outsider, wasn't he?
Yeah. And that was an exciting championship there, which we won't have this year. So, but
no.
So we both like Max for Monza. So let's talk about NASCAR for a little bit. They were at Darlington, one of the most historic tracks on the schedule, and wouldn't you know it, the one of the most historic numbers in the sport in victory lane once again. Eric Jones in the 43, finally getting that 200th win for the 43 car that was made famous by Richard Petty. Been a long time coming for them. I think their last win was it goes back to, I think, Eric Amarola pulled one off.
Yeah.
And before that, you got to go all the way back to when John Andretti won at Martinsville for them back in the 90s.
Yeah.
So there's good mojo for that team. Again, they are, outside looking in when it comes to the playoff. And we had a couple of guys that are in the playoff that were expected to be strong that had some trouble. And again, Darlington is the type of track that it's tough on the drivers. It's tough on the cars. It's exceptionally tough on the tires. But yeah, we saw Chase Elliott get into trouble early on. We saw Kyle Larson get into trouble early on. We saw engine failures for, I think, 4 of our championship contenders had some sort of engine failure. Kyle Busch, Truex is not a championship contender, but he had he lost an engine. I said Chastain had some engine issues, and Harvick. Now, Harvick had the car burst into flames, right? Now, and this has been talked about quite a bit. This is about the 3rd time we've seen a car on fire in NASCAR this year with the new car. And, the theory, of course, is that this under tray of the car picks up the rubber and the marbles. And, of course, you've got exhaust ports on both sides right there. And then if something is knocked loose there, that can set that rubber on fire. And we saw it was pretty spectacular in Harvick's case. It started on the passenger side of the car, and then before he was able to stop it, it was coming out of both sides of the car near the exhaust in that under tray area. Now, I know NASCAR applied a fix to it earlier in the season where they added a piece to keep that exhaust from being knocked loose, but evidently we're still having these problems. So you have any ideas on a fix for that, or is a design flaw? Or
no, so today they've announced, or this evening I think it was, at some point today, they've actually put out a bulletin to the teams to allow for a different coating, sort of a lubricant coating, should we say, on certain areas of the underbody and the side panels just behind the front tire and the wheel wells, which should prevent the amount of tire buildup that we saw at Darlington for sure. It's not a good look for the sport. It's not safe, to start with. But again, this is all part of the learning process for the teams, and obviously the owners and the teams and the drivers are all on board with the next gen car, and this is just part of what happens when you're going down this route. So it's all part of the learning process for sure. One thing that did disappoint me again from this incident was the length of time and the urgency shown by the safety crews to get to Harvick's car was pretty poor. We've discussed this a number of times, and one of our good friends, Seth Eggett, and myself, we were talking about this on some other issues with NASCAR safety. I would personally like to see the safety crews get to the car a lot faster than they did. You look at the guys at I'm going to use Indianapolis at the Indy 500 as an example. They're on track before the car sometimes comes to a standstill in some of these big impacts. So, that's something I think needs to be addressed, definitely, because that's just a human response issue rather than a technical issue.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, the man's car is on fire. Now, if he was, say he was knocked unconscious, right, and not able to get himself out of the car, well, that thing is just becoming an inferno. And again, to your point, I mean, IndyCar really has it right when it comes to their safety team and their response team. And again, IndyCar has their own team that travels with them. Now, we saw a couple of bumbles in Formula One with this as well, where Formula One doesn't necessarily travel with their own marshals, but whose car was on fire?
No.
Yeah, whose car was on fire when the signs? Yeah, and then the guy came over with the fire extinguisher, and then he turned around and set the fire extinguisher down. I'm like, use that fire extinguisher.
Yep.
I'm sitting here yelling at my television set. I'm like, the car is on fire. So again, that's definitely something that should be addressed. With the money pouring into both NASCAR and Formula One, these kind of things are inexcusable. And then you've got IndyCar, who's realistically running the lowest budgets of any of those series, really has this thing nailed down. And you have to give credit where credit is due. IndyCar has been on the cutting edge with safety response, as well as with collection of data on concussion injuries and all this sort of things. Thankful to a couple of really skilled and intelligent people they've had in charge of that over the years, Terry Trammell and Steve Olvey and fellows like that. So it's definitely concerning. Yeah.
So while you were, so I just pulled up the video from the race on Saturday night or Sunday night, and from the car coming to rest, the first marshal's fire extinguisher on the car was 39 seconds. I mean, Harvick was out of the car in that time. He jumped over the wall, so he wasn't in any danger, but it still took 39 seconds between the car coming to a standstill and the first fire extinguisher being put on the car, which to my mind is too long. But again, that's personal opinion, obviously. But not great.
No, not a good look. And of all guys you want to have it happen to, you've got one of the most vocal guys there, who was not afraid to speak his mind. And Harvick was also talking about or was it Hamlin talking about the hits being harder? Okay. And we've discussed this about where the hits are not necessarily harder, but they just kind of affect the driver's body in a different way that they're not conditioned to.
Mm-hmm.
And, you got enough drivers making noise about it that it's really something that needs to be addressed in some shape or form, because Denny Hamlin had to sit out. Well, he didn't have to, but he chose to sit out the Xfinity race that he was going to run as a primer, to the Darlington race, because he was still in a considerable amount of just achy, aches and pains from the lick he took in the last race.
Yep.
So, and again, I don't know what the fix is for that, but get the fire thing fixed first. Any driver's biggest fear is fire. Nearly every driver will tell you that they'd rather lose an arm or a leg than be burned to death.
Yep.
So, but it's just remarkable how quickly that thing went up, and it was, right there at the exhaust. So, I mean,
it was disappointing. It really was. Yeah. You don't want to see it, and it's avoidable, but it's all part of the learning process. And, we'll get there. The benefits from this next gen car far outweigh any of these issues that we're seeing right now, and give it some time, and they'll get their ducks in a row, as it were.
It's just a continuing process developing the car, and it's been interesting to see the car as it's the drivers getting more and more used to it. If you recall some of the early races, some guys had a bit of a tough time with the independent rear suspension, didn't behave as they were used to. Yep. Yeah. And the shifting, and, a couple guys losing it in corners on the road course, but as the season progressed, they've really seemed to, have figured out how to drive the car. But let's look at the title, because obviously Chase Elliott being the first guy out of the race and finishing last, he's still got enough points to squeak through this round.
Yeah.
But Larson, not so much. And he finished way back in the
Yeah,
order.
no,
I think he's still above the cut line, which is 12th, right? So because we're dropping 4 guys. The guys below the line are, I believe, Cindric, Dillon, Harvick, and
it will be now. Yeah.
Yep. No, yeah, Harvick is 16th, and one other guy. Who's it just escaped me who that last who's shoot.
Let me have a look.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I know it's awesome.
No, it's a Cindric, Dillon, Briscoe, Harvick are the 4 that are below the line.
Briscoe, another guy that ran into a little trouble at Darlington. So but
Suarez is the one that's just above that line.
Right. But at the beginning of the race, it was Joey Logano and William Byron that came out swinging, had the strongest cars. But at the end of the day, the Gibbs cars kind of wore those down. So you had Truex and Kyle Busch both being very strong in the second half of the race. Both those guys dropping out with engine problems. And then Eric Jones, credit to him, just holding on to it at the end of the race there with the charging Denny Hamlin behind him to take that win for Richard Petty and the gang. So good stuff. So we're off to Kansas next.
We are, yeah.
Yep. So which is Kansas is really, hard one to call. If I had to pick a winner for Kansas, I'd pick a Gibbs guy, and I would probably pick Kyle Busch. I know you'll abstain. I like the call though. I like the pick. Yep. So, but it's going to be, but it's going to be a good weekend ahead of us. We've got Kansas, Monza, and then the IndyCar finale, where we'll decide a champion, and then go into hibernation mode till the fall, or till the spring rather. And then it'll be time to settle those couple of seats there, see what Colton Hurd is going to do. Oliver Askew is trying to get back into the series. A couple other guys.
Didn't we see Youden Hollander have announced they're going to be running a second car?
Yes, that's the other news I meant to report. Thank you for bringing it up. Yeah, Youden Hollister is going to run a second car next year.
Do we know who for yet? Or
not yet? They just announced it is either earlier today or yesterday. They just announced the second car yet, so they may be looking for a pay driver. I don't know. You figure whoever
the second driver will be announced at a later date. There you go. Yeah.
Right. So you figure whoever wins Indy Lights has some scholarship money they can bring along to the team. So whoever wins that, which is going to be looked at heavily for that ride, certainly. The Indy Lights is supposed to be guaranteed with at least 3 IndyCar starts. Sometimes the Indy Lights champion gets those 3 starts. Sometimes they walk into a full-time ride. It just depends on what's open at the time. And I think Linus,
looking at it,
Linus Lundqvist is currently the man to beat in Indy Lights. So
looking at it here, there's the 3 drivers that I've seen here that are 2 drivers that I mentioned is Ben Pedersen, and also if all the dominoes and cards fall in the right order, it could be Rosenqvist that ends up there as well potentially.
Yeah. Felix is going to be a hot property here if Palou ends up in that McLaren seat, because Felix, realistically, he can go to McLaren Formula E, but he has in his contract that if they don't put him in an IndyCar, he's free to seek an IndyCar ride. But if he doesn't find an IndyCar ride, he's welcome to join their Formula E team or do whatever McLaren may need of him.
Yeah, it's a strange situation, isn't it?
Strange situation, yeah. But he has the out in his contract. And again, you figure if Colton Hurd is out of the picture at Andretti, it's a prime seat right there, right? If Alex Palou is out of the picture at Ganassi, that's a prime seat right there too. And Felix has, to his credit, come on strong here at the end of the year. He's been putting on some great performances. He doesn't have any wins to show for it, but he's been He's been fast. He's been aggressive. He's been great in qualifying. So he's really trying to make his case for why he belongs in this series. And I believe he does. I think Felix is good for the series. Yeah. So, but
it is a strange contract situation, though, isn't it? You know, it's like, well, you've got to drive with us, but if we find somebody else, you don't. It's a very strange situation.
But smart on Felix's agent for putting that in there, because Felix, at the end of the day, wants to stay in the IndyCar series, but if that's not possible, he wants something to fall back on, so he's racing somewhere. So it's kind of the best of both worlds for him. You know, obviously, the ideal situation keeps him in that 7 car next year, but you know, that's all still pending all this litigation. And
whoever wrote that clause in his contract needs to go and work for Alpine Formula One team, because they obviously need some help in sorting out driver contracts.
Certainly so. But that takes us to the end of our hour. So I want to thank Adam Schrack for coming on. I want to thank you, Richard. I want to thank the Hoobazoo Radio Network. I want to thank iHeartRadio, YouTube, Spreaker, and Google Podcasts. But most of all, I want to thank you folks who listen to us. We'll be back in a week's time. Tell you who won the IndyCar championship. Until then, good night.
WHOOBAZOO, that's Hoobazoo.com.
Enter website, enter website, enter website, enter website.